Will Florida State's offense be a mismatch against Georgia Tech's defense?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Seminoles. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Please like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today's show is going to be all about Florida State and Georgia Tech. We're finally to the point where we can start talking game week. We can start talking about just Noles versus Yellow Jackets. College football is almost here. The game is on the 24th. It's the 15th. That's 9 days. There's also the point that this is the last weekend that there's no Florida State football. That's a really cool thing. So the Noles have a scrimmage Friday, got a practice Saturday. There's no media access or anything. But here's the good news. That means they're buttoning down the hatches for a reason. This is when the game plan goes in and all the things that are fun happen. So to that point, I'm going to talk about how I think Mike Norvell and the Noles are going to attack Georgia Tech, why they should attack them the way they will, and why I think that Georgia Tech could be in more trouble than I originally thought. Now that I've broken down some of their depth chart and some of the things that Florida State's doing, here's how it's going to roll. First off, Florida State's depth across the board. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot in the podcast. If you take nothing else from this pod today, Florida State's depth, receivers, running backs, tight ends, whatever it may be. And I think they'll use everybody pretty liberally, to be honest with you, because they got plenty of talent at the skill spots. I think that you're going to see a lot of guys rotate in and out. Malik Benson, Lawrence Tafili, there might be a few guys that play more reps than others that it's definitive. But overall, I think they're going to move in a lot of bodies in and out of the lineup because Georgia Tech is not as deep. It's the first game of the year. A lot of guys cramp, et cetera, in football games. We see it every year. Florida State holds an advantage. That will pay dividends in the second half. Second point that I'm going to talk about quite a bit today is just sheer speed. I don't think Georgia Tech is going to run with Florida State, especially again with the depth, very well. Florida State can afford to be very liberal with their substitutions across the board. Georgia Tech, I checked it, they just didn't get enough guys. Not that they didn't get some transfers or some guys coming in. Not saying they didn't. They're a much improved program. I just don't think they have enough depth. So unless they get some early breaks, meaning like a block punt, a pick six, scoop and score, something to help them, they're going to have to play from behind. Now, their offense is good. They got some pretty talented players. I truly believe Florida State will be challenged against them. Defensively, though, that's what we're talking about. Today's show is Florida State's offense against Georgia Tech's defense. I'll start breaking down the other side of the ball this weekend and into next week. So, first matchup I want to talk about. DJ Uiagalelei. Mike Norvell has talked about here recently that he's played well. There's been reports in the media that he's played well. That's a good sign. He's starting to gain a little bit of confidence with the guys beyond just completing basic out routes and slants. There's a confidence amongst the media and everybody else that I hadn't heard. And Norvell bringing him up the way he has is a good sign too. It's not one or the other. It's both. And then again, the speed they have with Benson and all these guys, I think Georgia Tech's going to play a lot of soft coverage. That's going to work out just fine. 50-year senior quarterback. He's coming from a system at Oregon State where they ran the ball. They projected down the field if it was there, but they would take the underneath stuff happily because they had a really good running back and a great offensive line. It's not that much different than at Florida State, honestly. He's not changing all that much the more I look into it. This might have been a little better fit than what I gave it credit for when originally picking the Noles. So if Georgia Tech wants to play off, Florida State can throw down to Ja'Kai. Florida State can throw down to Kentra. Florida State can throw down to Deuce. And then you got Benson and you got Brown. We're going to talk a bunch about them here in a little bit. But I think you're going to see a bunch 5 to 8 yard kind of routes. And if Georgia Tech just wants to give them the field, Florida State will be happy to do it because eventually some of those guys are going to miss tackles. Georgia Tech's run defense is terrible. Part of the reason it was terrible last season, and until otherwise proven, I think it'll be bad this year too, the defensive secondary has to tackle better, and the linebackers have to tackle better. Now, they've got one kid in the middle linebacker had 81 tackles. Part of that is they didn't make enough stuffs up front, and they didn't do a good enough job of getting out of third down situations, so he's on the field too much and has to make some of those tackles. But he's the one guy I think that had a pretty good day against the Noles. But overall, I just don't think they're going to tackle in space well enough, and Florida State's going to get in a lot of manageable 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 1s. DJ's going to be a horse if you want to run the football, just basic RPO stuff or a sneak, and then you've got a bevy of running backs. So the game plan to me, and again, I'll talk about this throughout, the speed will cause problems. They're going to spread it around, and they're going to rotate a lot of guys and wear out Georgia Tech. If there's something else to add to that, I mean, let's just be honest. Florida State's offensive line might hold the biggest advantage in this, again, until otherwise proven, because I went through player by player for Georgia Tech on this with their defensive front. I don't think they have a dude, a guy that's just bona fide NFL player. They have some guys that are potentially there, Biggers and a few other guys they might. I'll give you a few examples of that. But Florida State's offensive line's really experienced, and I just don't think that you're going to see Georgia Tech after, say, the second quarter. Once you get in the third, there are not a lot of guys coming in, I think, that are going to be purely upper-level Power 4 players going against the Noles when they rotate guys in. So here's the key guy. He's humongous, 330, 340, somewhere in that range. Zeke Biggers, D-tackle. That's a big dude now. 40 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack last year. He's a pretty good player. But who's going to be the other guy? Here's an example. Thomas Gore went to Miami last year, transferred out of the FCS or the lower level programs, and just didn't do a great job at Miami, so he transfers out. Now he's playing at Tech. Last year he had 2 sacks, both in the Temple game. They didn't have a very good offensive line, but he only had 8 tackles on the year, 4 tackles for loss. He got beat out, basically. Didn't have a great year at Miami. He may be the starter, but he'll certainly be one of the main guys. Quicker, fire plug guy. He's a good athlete, but I don't think that Florida State's going to struggle against him. And if that is one of your top guys, if not your second best, I think Biggers will definitely be their best D tackle. Florida State's going to run the ball on you too, in addition to that short passing game, and you're going to see a lot of missed tackles. You're going to see it over and over and over again, and that's when the problems start for Georgia Tech. If they get behind, and I truly expect they will, that's going to be a repeat of last year. And what does that mean? Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech, had 16 interceptions. When they get behind because their defense struggles, you got to make up those points. You take more chances, you have poor ball security, fumbles, etc. And then that's when the picks happen. He led the ACC in interceptions. Also led him in touchdowns. Very odd, but he did. 29 touchdown passes. Again, they had to throw. They gave up 221.3 yards rushing per game, 131st in college football out of 133 teams. So that, to Haynes' credit, like he had to take more chances. But Florida State's going to run down their throat because they're not going to be able to cover Florida State, and they're going to play soft coverage. Prove me wrong. That's what they did last year. I saw them play live. I don't think they're good enough there. Florida State's going to run by them once they start coming up, or even if they don't, they'll just make guys miss. I don't think their secondary is that good in general. They got some guys that are good athletes. I just don't think they finish plays and make enough big plays against an offense that has as much skill as Florida State. Here's another little secret sauce. Jalen Lucas is going to have a big game. May not be a ton of plays, but they put him on the slot, screens, etc. Georgia Tech's going to have to try to catch the rabbit. I think that Tofili, another possibility there too. They're not going to be able to do it. Coming up next on Locked On Seminoles, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the play calls, the concepts that I would use against Georgia Tech. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. If you're looking for an opportunity to go to a concert, to go to a play, to go to a Major League Baseball game, or to catch the Noles, there's a great chance to do it with Gametime. Download the app, check it out today. With a couple of clicks, you can be looking at a stadium map to see where your seat is, to look at the venue from afar. Any place you click on the stadium to find a seat, it'll pull up what you're looking at from that seat towards the main part of the field or the stadium, the stage, anything that you're going to. So again, it's not just sports. It's anything you're looking at. You could go get a theater ticket. You could go see opera or anything else. And that's really cool because it is very wide. They are the official Major League Baseball sponsor. And here's something else that's really cool about them. This is one of my favorite things because it's a pet peeve. They have all-inclusive pricing. You get the price up front, so you don't get surprised at the end. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. How would you scheme against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets? This is what I would do. Because, again, I don't think their secondary is going to just man up and take on the speed that Florida State has and some of the size. Hakeem, somebody like that, they might throw some jump balls if they want to go that route. Or if they just play cover 4, which is a basic soft man kind of coverage, really. They might throw some jump balls to Deuce or anybody else down the field with Florida State size at receiver. And do not forget about Morlock and the tight ends. There's some possibilities there as well. Landon Thomas, the freshman, there's a lot of possibilities for Florida State to take shots. But if I was them, this is what I would do. I would use a lot of 2 running backs. Why? I mentioned a moment ago that Jalen Lucas, that's a kid that transferred from Indiana, 5'9", 170-some pounds, and he can fly. But he's also very twitchy in space. The more important thing here, speed's great, don't get me wrong. The more important issue, making guys miss with lateral cuts. God-given ability. Florida State's got more guys that can do that than just about anybody in the country. You got Feely. You got guys who are really athletic overall that come into the program like Mekhi Danzy. I mean, he's like the 5th or 6th guy. Sam Singleton, Cam Davis. I don't care which kid you put in. You got Rodell who can make guys miss. He had a great game against Georgia last year for Alabama. All these guys can. Put one of them in the slot. Make them make a decision. You see who they put out there. You can change your play call, run RPO, and all kinds of different things with it. Can Georgia Tech match up? I don't think so. And I don't think so by a large margin, especially if Florida State goes tempo at any point. I have no idea if they will. But if they do, I think that'll cause chaos for Georgia Tech. I really don't think they're that good in coverage in part because they know the run game isn't going to be. They're afraid of getting gashed and then guys hitting home runs. So they play a little conservative in coverage, too, to have more guys back for that. Florida State can dink and dunk for 5-yard gains, I think, all the way down the field. And again, any of those guys could make it happen. Here's the other thing. The 2 tight ends concept might be just as effective, if not more, because you can use the tight ends in the slot to block on some of those screens, toss sweeps, quarterback run, anything you want. If Georgia Tech wants to play soft, put big guys in there and smash them. You can also run your basic guard and tackle, pulling around. You can run some reverses and different things. Be pretty versatile. Make it difficult, if you will, for Georgia Tech to even think about the opportunity to get off the field because you have their head spinning. Norvell's a tremendous play caller. His offensive staff has done a good job. Why would this be any different? I think this is probably one of the easier games, especially since you got all summer to prepare. Mike won't say that in the press conference. He's no fool. You don't want to motivate your opposition. But this is about as close to carte blanche as you're going to get this year on what you're going to run. If they're going to do anything that surprises somebody, and that would just, to me, be lining up in I formation, 2 tight ends, actual 2 tights. I think you spread them out and let your athletes kind of just run around. You could do it a little bit. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with running I formation or something similar, but I don't think they'll be under center much, if at all. And I don't think they'll run any shotgun, just pure power stuff like that very much either, other than maybe short yardage or a special play. The last little point I want to bring up on this is the special play. Feely, Jalen Lucas, Kasaya, any of the guys really at running back, they all have the ability to make somebody miss. Don't be surprised if Sam Singleton gets quite a few carries. They have the depth. They got 5-6 guys that can carry the football. I know they lost a really good guy in Trey, Florida State will be just fine at running back. Rotate them in and out. Don't worry about it, because Georgia Tech, unless somebody just gets red hot, that's fine. Georgia Tech is going to get wore out. Into the third quarter, I guarantee you, if Florida State stays balanced, which they are known to do, Georgia Tech will fold like a tent. Prove me wrong. I don't think they have the horses to run with the rabbits, and then you mix in a reverse here or there to get them going one way once they start playing downhill against that run game. Whatever formation, 3 wide, 4 wide, 2 tights, 22 personnel, I don't care. They're going to have to come up. You're going to catch them on one of these misdirection plays, and it could even be a bootleg too. Tight end comes underneath the formation. Jack West is wide open in the flat, 20-yard gain. Those kinds of plays happen when you run the football and you're committed to it. The Noles averaged about 150 yards last year with that banged up offensive line. That number's going up this year. They should run for 250 against Georgia Tech if that's their priority. But if they truly think that Georgia Tech's defensive secondary is vulnerable, they might throw it a little more than I would. Remember the Pittsburgh game last season? I called it all week. I said it on game day, and then I watched the game, and I was dead wrong. Keon didn't play. Johnny didn't play. That's pretty rough. Ja'Kai goes out and gets 115 yards. They attacked Pittsburgh the polar opposite way I would have and won the game going away. Hey, if you find a weakness and you can exploit it, by all means. I'm not the first guy that's looked at it differently than a head coach in college football, that's for sure. More importantly, I think that the diversity with all the players coming in and out of the lineup and using misdirections and changing personnel will make Georgia Tech that much more tired. Get guys like Biggers running on screens, outside runs. It's going to be very difficult for them. Before I wrap up with the final point of the show here, one more thing to mention right now. Georgia Tech has nothing to lose. The one thing I am concerned about with them, with the defense, is they're going to come out and not do any of the things I talked about, playing off coverage, etc. Show a front that like nobody thought they were going to run. A 50 front, meaning double eagle, both outside linebackers on the line, just hell-bent for leather, and they come at them. I'd be curious how Florida State would attack their defense if they were in attack mode. I don't think they will do that for fear of the ball going over their head. Maybe I'm wrong. Just something to think about. It's opening weekend. You might try it. And again, they gave up 221.3 yards per game last year, 131st in the nation to stopping the run, which they didn't stop anything. They were the worst team in the Power 5, dead last. There were a couple of teams that were G5 that were below, and that's it. They might try that. It's possible. When we wrap up the show here in just a second, we're going to talk about some of the players that I think are going to have the best stats and just have a little fun with it. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Who has the best day against Georgia Tech? That's an easy question to ask. But to be honest, I don't know if I would pick any one Nole to be at the top of the board against Georgia Tech, running or receiving. And the reason I say that is I really think they will spread it around. 2 reasons. Number one, the depth chart is pretty big. It's not like they don't have a bunch of guys competing for spots. And then something that Norvell did in the last opportunity to have a presser, he mentioned guys by name at receiver, several of them. I'm very curious about like Jalen Brown. He's had some moments in fall camp. In terms of playing style, for those who don't know Jalen, he's a burner. He reminds me a little bit of Benson in style. Needs to get a little bigger, a little stronger like most kids, but played 1 year at LSU. Now he's at Florida State. I wouldn't be surprised if he had only like 2 catches, but for 55 yards. Like he's a legit 4-3 kind of guy. Excuse me. I don't think many teams will handle Benson, Jalen Lucas, and Brown on the field at the same time. Any one of those 3 can house you. And there's certainly others too, I'm well aware. Hakeem's out there. It's because he's a bigger body guy. You better be ready to get on your horse. Florida State has deep speed. So for yardage, it might be completely different than like the number of catches, for instance. I could totally see Jalen Lucas or Ja'Kai Douglas leading them in receptions because I think they'll be the main slot guys. Maybe I'm wrong. They might move Hakeem to slot for part of this game if they think there's a mismatch. It's first game of the year, so we're all guessing here. But if they're going to play soft coverage, like I think the slot's going to be open, screen game is going to be open, it could go any one direction. This much I do know. If you take Benson aside, and he should lead them in receptions in a lot of games, if you take him aside on like the number of attempts that DJ tries to get the ball to him, I think it's as wide open as it gets. My best guess is that you're going to see one of the tight ends. I would assume that it's going to be one of the guys that's inexperienced. Don't discount Landon Thomas or somebody too. Again, it's first game of the year. Kyle Morlock's my pick there, but nothing shocking in the first game. If Kyle had 4 or 5 catches, it wouldn't be surprising. The underneath game, a tight end screen, checkdowns, etc., he should have at least 3 catches, I would assume. As for runners, this is just what I think for totals. I brainstormed on this. I'd like to hear everybody's comments on it. I don't know what the rushing total will be because I'll be shocked if they don't run for at least 200 yards, at least. But this is how I had it in terms of breakdown. Tofili, 10 to 12 touches as a running back. This is just runs, not receptions. Rodell, 8 to 10. And then after that, I think at least 3 more guys get touches as a running back. Sam Singleton, Cam Davis, Keziah, all in the 5 to 8 range, somewhere in there. It could be different than that. Maybe Mackay, which I think he'll end up returning some kicks and whatnot. The other freshman, if he plays running back in this game, he might also play some slot. He can fly. That's a guy that might get a few carries too. Florida State's going to spread the football around because they have the talent, the systems in place. And again, Georgia Tech doesn't have the depth. I think Florida State will run them out. Like I said earlier, they're going to be chasing the rabbit because Florida State's got a bunch of them. I'm really looking for it. Sam Singleton, by the way, might be the guy that ends up with the most yards. Just as an example, even though he might only have 6 carries because he can go. Seen him play in high school. He could really, really run. That's going to make it hard for them. The only other thing I'll say with the stats with the rushing, I bet you they run for about 5.5 yards a carry at the running back position. And if you're giving up that many yards per carry, you're in trouble. So far as the receivers go, again, Malik, I think, is going to get the most chances down the field. So Benson, maybe he catches 1 bomb, but I bet you they get a couple of big plays down the field, including at least 1 jump ball, I'm guessing, to Hakeem. I think he's got all the talent in the world, all the upside in the world, and I'm really thinking that he's going to be a guy that starts to break out as this season goes. Remember, this is only his 2nd year of college football, so he's learned a lot and he's changed his body, but this is game 1 of season 2 for him, so we'll see. But the future for Florida State football, a lot of it is dependent on guys like that because you only have so many guys that are 6'3" and like 210, 215, whatever. They can run like him. He's a deer. Final point here today, Florida State should win this game by at least 2 scores. That's my early projection. I need to look at a little bit more with Georgia Tech's offense. I do think pretty highly of it. They got a good quarterback in terms of talent. If their defense plays better, his interceptions will go down. But I don't think that's going to matter in this game, even if their offense doesn't turn it over. And even if the offense is playing with the defense that does a little better, I still think Florida State's one of those rare teams that with a 5th-year senior quarterback in DJ Ungwe, throwing short passes to Jalen, to Morlock, screen to Benson, reverse, to Feely, hands it off to Jalen Lucas on a screen or on a reverse, and they hit a big play. They're going to find ways to move the ball. I just don't see any other way other than like major scoop and scores, onside kick, something like that, where Georgia Tech's offense is going to be able to keep up with Florida State. That's my opinion. Please like and hit that notification bell. Please subscribe, rate, and review. I'd really like to hear what you have to say about the stats. Which guys do you think the Noles kind of lean on? I think it'll be a fun exercise to go through. Again, I think it's going to be really, really balanced. I know that's not the most exciting thing, but I'm honest. I'm never going to tell you anything outside of what I believe, and that is truly what I think. So thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Make sure you check out Locked On College Football next with my guy Spencer McLaughlin. Everybody have a good one, and I'll see you on Friday.